presents, from the National Hot Rod Association, Championship Drag Racing. Great American Midwest, home of National Trail Raceway near Columbus, Ohio, and the 19th annual running of the NHRA Springnationals. An all-star field of competitors has made performance the story of this event. In qualifying, drag racing's all-time quickest car obliterated another track record, the National Trail elapsed time mark. Gary Beck kept the car under control as a right front tire came off on the run that netted him a 5.47-second elapsed time.
Sounds like we need an improvement in front wheels and tires. This has been happening a lot.
Well, we've got these tires are a little different, if you notice, and we've had no trouble all year long with them, but it's what it does is these tires are good to 300 miles an hour, where the tires that most guys run are 200-mile-an-hour tires. But this is the first time we've had any trouble with them. But the track is a little choppy right down in there, and if you're just skipping along and then just bang her pretty hard, you might upset the tire.
While Beck was dominating the qualifying in Top Fuel, Don Prudhomme was doing some record-setting of his own in funny car. Prudhomme's season to this point has been troubled. The performance of his car, less than spectacular. But the many-time funny car champion displayed some of his awesome power in a qualifying attempt that set a new National Trail speed record. A mark of over 249 miles an hour put Prudhomme in the record book.
Well, you know, you've got a lot of track records. They don't mean that much anymore, but that speed tells you that you're on the right track for elimination.
Yeah, it tells you we got a little bit of power. We're happy with it.
Okay.
Prudhomme back on track again. While all this action has been taking place on the quarter-mile racetrack, Steve Evans has been examining the racetrack itself.
I'm down here at the very far end of National Trail Raceway. When this track was built back in the early 60s, the shutdown area was more than adequate for the cars of the period. But now, with the top classes going almost 100 miles an hour faster than they used to, you'll find a unique piece of safety equipment down here. It's called the net. In fact, in this case, it is a double net. The idea is to catch a dragster, a funny car, whatever, if the parachute and the brake should fail. How well does the net work? Well, we all found out yesterday when California funny car driver Mike Dunn gave it the supreme test.
Mike Dunn and the ride of his life. It's almost unbelievable, the intensity of the fire. The parachutes vaporized. The right rear tire explodes, shattering the fiberglass body. From another angle, you can see that right rear slick explode, breaking the body in half. The car thunders into the net. First, the initial contact, then thrown sideways into the second net. The car, ensnared in the nylon web of the catch nets, comes to a sudden stop. And with the smoke rising from the burning tires, engine, and grass, Mike Dunn releases his safety harness, jumps from the roll cage, and hard as it is to believe, Mike Dunn was able to run to safety.
Mike Dunn, you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
It's one of the worst accidents I've ever seen at this end of the racetrack.
Wasn't that bad.
I looked it from here. I think when you see the tape, you'll believe me. The net definitely prevented what could have been an awful bad situation for you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Throttle hung wide open, and reached for the fuel shot, and then blew up and backfired and everything else.
So everything went wrong that could go wrong, really.
Yeah.
I was pulling as hard as I could to get that throttle back, and something got hung up somewhere.
I'll let you get up to your crew. They're concerned as we are.
Mike Dunn, one cool driver under intense pressure. The 1983 NHRA Spring Nationals brought to you by Goodyear, makers of Eagle high-performance radials and Wrangler all-season radials for light trucks. And by Brute, make every day your Brute day with Brute by Fabergé. And by Motorcraft, quality parts for all makes of cars. Motorcraft exceeds the need. We'll be right back to the Spring Nationals in just a moment. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClelland, and along with Steve Evans, we're here to bring you all the excitement of the Spring Nationals. As you have seen, one of the big stories is in Top Fuel Eliminator. Let's go to round number 2 action. Jody Smart rolling forward to do his burnout. There were a total of 16 cars that qualified in Top Fuel Eliminator. We are now to the second round. There will be 8 cars involved in this round of racing. Jody Smart is up against Gene Snow. Jody from San Antonio, Texas, a warehouse distributor of high-performance parts, while Gene Snow owns an oil company in Fort Worth, Texas. Snow was involved in an interesting race in the first round when Snow in the near lane raced Jim Head, a hometown favorite from Columbus, Ohio. Snow began to build a big lead right off the starting line as Jim Head's engine exploded into a ball of flame. Head was able to bring the car to a safe stop, but the engine, as you can see, just obliterated itself about 200 feet off the starting line.
Well, Jim, it's been an awful long time since I've seen one that ablaze at the starting line.
I didn't see it, but I hear it was pretty good.
What causes something like that?
Well, in this case, the motor got pretty hot on the starting line. I think we just lost some pistons. It shook real hard, and I think it shook something off of it.
It's at moments like that you're darn glad the engine's in the back, huh?
Yeah, I guess I am, but I guess we're talking about switching to funny cars, so maybe it won't be in the back next year.
Gene Snow had a relatively easy go of it in the first round, but this round of racing, maybe not quite so simple, as Jody Smart has been close to winning an NHRA national title several times. He has finished in the runner-up spot, but has been a bridesmaid thus far, has yet to make it to the winner's circle in Top Fuel racing. Smart, having laid out of racing for a number of years, as did Gene Snow, came back in the Top Fuel ranks. Both cars have done exceptionally well. And it is an instant smoke off the tires for Jody Smart, and Gene Snow, with an outstanding elapsed time of 5.82 seconds, wins his second round race and moves into the semifinals. For Jody Smart, it'll be another day before he comes in for a shot at a Top Fuel win. Our next pair of cars fired and rolling into the water. The start of the smoky burnout, Scott Coletta against the defending world champion, Shirley Muldowney. No person had won a Top Fuel World Champion title more than once until Shirley Muldowney came along, and she has done it 3 times. Shirley from Mount Clemens, Michigan, is racing the son of Connie Coletta, Scott Coletta. Scott had the thrill of his young racing career in the first round as he was matched against the low qualifier and the new track record holder, Gary Beck. But Beck fell victim to a loss of traction, and Scott Coletta moved out to a lead and continued to hold it as the quickest car in the field fell in the first round of racing to Scott Coletta.
Well, Top Fuel dragster racing has gotten very competitive, and by no means does this racing team over here think they got a handle on everybody that's over working on their cars right now. We're out today, but we'll be back racing and winning some rounds at the next ones. In the end of the year, we hope to be on top of the pile.
Not an easy go in either the first or second round for Scott Coletta. First round, he defeats Gary Beck. Now he is up against the reigning world champion, Scott Coletta, in the near lane. Shirley Muldowney in the far lane. A good start by both cars. Scott Coletta losing traction momentarily, and Shirley Muldowney wins it by about a car length. A 5.99 second elapsed time for Shirley Muldowney moves her into the semifinals. Back at the starting line, the engine's coming to life for our next pair of cars. Crew Chief Ron Barrow injecting some gasoline into that engine to get it started as Connie Coletta sits behind the wheel and awaits the word to bring it up to the starting line. Connie Coletta, the father of son Scott, who you saw just a moment ago, and head of Coletta Flying Service and this two-car racing team. The burnout, long and smoky, getting those tires hot as Connie Coletta squares off against Doug Kerhulis. Kerhulis from Bakersfield, California, is one of the rising stars in championship drag racing, while Connie Coletta, a veteran, his first major event win goes back to 1964. Coletta and Kerhulis in round number 2. Steve has had a chance to catch up with Shirley Muldowney.
Shirley, I saw you just talking to Scott, apologizing for something. What happened?
Well, the sun reflected off the pre-stage light, and I couldn't see it, and it just took me an extra couple minutes to get in the pre-stage, and I might have made him wait.
Yeah, he said good race. He was very happy to be that close to you. A nice hole shot, 500s ahead of Scott.
But we run a 599. I think we got a junk blower.
So a new supercharger will go in the pink car?
Yeah, we can find one.
So Shirley Muldowney one step closer to what could be a 5th Spring Nationals title.
Shirley starts the search for a supercharger, while Connie Coletta and Doug Kerhulis are at the starting line concentrating on the electronic starting device, the Christmas tree. The tree will go green and both cars should leave the line together. The RPMs on the engines begin to mount, and it's a great start for Doug Kerhulis in the far lane. He's got about a car length lead, and he wins it over Connie Coletta with a fine 5.82 second elapsed time. The Bakersfield Flash is into the semifinals. We watch again, you see just a wisp of smoke off of Coletta's tires, and that may have been the loss of traction that could have cost him the car length that was the lead for Doug Kerhulis as they crossed the finish line.
Well, Doug Kerhulis with a 582 has suddenly become a big factor here at the Spring Nationals. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We put a little fuel pump on it. It wasn't hurt at the last room, but we put a little pump on it and stepped on a little bit for Connie, of course, because he's the one that will come up and bite you every time.
This is the farthest you've gone in quite a while.
You know what? This is the farthest we've been in 2 years top fuel racing. We've won smaller events in California and around divisional races, but this is a pleasure.
2 to go.
You bet. Thank you.
And obviously pleased, Doug Kerhulis heads back to the pits to get ready for the semifinals as our final pair of cars come out of the burnout area in this, the second round of racing. It is Richard Tharp in the far lane from Dallas, Texas, against Californian Denver Schutz from Fresno. Schutz is a raisin grower. Richard Tharp has to be one of the most worried drivers in this second round of competition. It was back in the first round as he was racing Rance McDaniels that Tharp ran into problems. The car went up in smoke right off the starting line. He pulled ahead of McDaniels, won the race, but exploded an engine. A ball of fire and the supercharger leveled, hanging off to the side.
Richard, I guess the only good thing we could say is you won.
Yeah, that ain't too good right now.
Have we got another motor?
Yeah, we got 2 more motors. We ain't got another blower, though. I don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Would like to say a good job of driving, Richard. Just to not put it in the net under those situations was incredible.
Well, thank you.
Tharp and his crew went back to the pits, and Steve followed.
Well, one piece of equipment you hope you never have to use in the middle of a big drag race is the engine hoist, but it's in full operation in the Richard Tharp camp. The blower explosion in round number 1 has forced the Kilpatrick and Cannell team to change engines, so the spare power plant going in right now. It's not as simple as it might seem, because when a blower explosion happens like that, it's very, very hard on throttle linkage and fuel lines. A lot of broken bits and pieces that can be very, very time-consuming. Richard and the crew don't have any time to be talking to us. We're going to stay out of their way and hope they make it into the lanes for round number 2.
Steve, we know he got the engine in, but the question is, how good is it? Richard Tharp in the far lane against Denver Schutz in the near lane. Schutz, one of the drivers from the West Coast that is starting a national event tour, and he red lights. He leaves the starting line too soon, giving an automatic victory to Richard Tharp. He did not have to test that engine. What a break for Richard. A tough break for Denver Schutz. Meantime, back in the Shirley Muldowney pit area, her son John and the crew installing a supercharger borrowed from Jody Smart as they prepare Shirley's car to race Gene Snow in the semifinals. Doug Kerhulis will go against Richard Tharp at the Spring Nationals. At the Spring Nationals at National Trail Raceway near Columbus, Ohio, I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans. And some of the most popular cars in all of championship drag racing are getting ready for the second round of competition. The funny cars, a fiberglass bodied creation with tubular chassis, the engine and drivetrain combination utilizing those 2,500 horsepower nitro burning engines, just like in the Top Fuel dragsters. The big difference here, the engine sits in front of the driver. And as we saw earlier in Mike Dunn's case, can be a real problem if they catch on fire. The first pair of cars, Raymond Beadle, the low qualifier, against Al Segrini. Raymond Beadle from Dallas, Texas, the racing entrepreneur that has qualified in the #1 spot for Al Segrini from southeastern Massachusetts. We saw him just about a month ago win our last Diamond P Sports coverage of an NHRA event, the Cajun Nationals. But that's all forgotten at this moment, as in the second round of racing, Raymond Beadle in the near lane with the Blue Max squares off against Al Segrini. The burnout's completed. Both drivers now watching their crew member direct them up to just the right spot on the starting line, trying to find that point that will give them the most traction possible. The tires, some 16 inches wide, will be clawing at the asphalt, trying to reach that combination of acceleration without losing traction. Both drivers staging their cars, and it is up in smoke for Al Segrini. What a break for Raymond Beadle. He heads to the finish line, but something appears to go wrong with his car as it slows to only 180 miles an hour. But Al Segrini did not have the right combination. He takes the early turnoff as he only went a few feet under full acceleration. The tires instantly going up in smoke, indicating that dreaded loss of traction. And he watches his competition, Raymond Beadle, head down the track and take a very important win. And Raymond Beadle hurls the supercharger, the blower belt, towards the security man and begins to take off his helmet and his fire protective clothing. Raymond Beadle won the race, but had some blower belt problems.
Well, Raymond, I was going to ask if you saw him go up in smoke and took it easy, but obviously the blower belt's gone.
Yeah, this is about the third one of these Krager blower belts we broke. So, I mean, every time we put a new one on, it breaks. So.
Nothing inside the engine that's making this happen then?
No, I guess we're going to find one of our old ones. Didn't mean to throw it at you over. Don't arrest me.
Did you see Segrini go up in smoke?
No, I didn't. I never saw him. Never saw him. The car left real good. It moved through the middle real good, and it just broke about 1,000 foot.
Well, it's been almost a year since you'd sat on the pole at one of these events. You got to be pleased with the comeback here, you and your guys.
Yeah, it's running real good, so no problem at all.
Here, you can have this.
Yeah.
Raymond waving the broken blower belt like a trophy to the Blue Max crew, indicating, well, gang, there's some work coming up, and some work was performed on this car. This is John Force. And it is not normal to see all the racer tape, as it's called, all over the front of his fiberglass-bodied funny car. John Force in round number 2 is racing Mark Oswald, the driver of the Candies and Hughes Pontiac Trans Am-bodied car. Oswald from Cincinnati, Ohio, driving for the Louisiana-based crew, while John Force hails from Fullerton, California. Force is another of those racers at the Spring Nationals that is very fortunate to be in the second round. Back in the first round, after he defeated Kenny Bernstein, John Force had his parachute look like a streamer. And once again, trying to stop the car, John Force takes dead aim on those catch nets at the end of the racetrack. Force guiding his car towards the center of the track and the center of the net, much slower than we saw Mike Dunn go into it. The net stretches, then responds and stops John Force.
John Force won the battle here, but may have lost the war. John, a good job of hitting the net as you're supposed to, and you might be able to fix this car.
We always fix them, Steve.
That's true. You've done this in the past.
I double-checked the chute twice. I didn't shove my cable far enough. My error. That's just a stupid mistake. I knew it when it didn't blossom. I went for it again. It was just too late.
Well, John's okay. The car, a bit of damage, but as he said, we always fix them, Steve.
And fix it he did, Steve, as back at the starting line in the second round, John Force is ready to do battle with Mark Oswald. There is a lot of tape holding that fiberglass body together, but the NHRA officials have looked it over, says it's okay. And here's John against Oswald. Mark Oswald out as John Force headed for the guardrail. It had been a little tougher to fix at that point, and he hit the guardrail. He did not, and Mark Oswald streaks to the win at a 6.18 second elapsed time. His speed a fine 241 miles an hour. A lot of work by John Force and the crew, but it went to no avail as he lost traction and lost the race. Our next pair of cars, the Orange Baron, is in the near lane. That is Gary Bergen. He is racing Tom Anderson. Anderson from Macedon, New York, driving for Alan Aronek and Jim Ouimet. While Gary Bergen is one of the true touring professionals on the championship trail from Stanton, California, the Orange Baron. Bergen, a former national champion, enjoying a fine spring nationals thus far. Following the direction of his crewman up into his own tracks, left after his long, smoky burnout, as Tom Anderson does the same. A lot of concentration necessary to drive one of these cars. Just imagine, in the distance of a few short city blocks, you are accelerating to over 240 miles an hour in less than 6 seconds. Anderson up in smoke. Gary Bergen, he also had to lift for a second, and it's a close race, and Gary Bergen pulls it out at the finish. A 6.26 second elapsed time. His speed, 233 miles an hour. But as we watch again, watch Tom Anderson in the far lane lose traction. Right there, the car up in smoke. Gary Bergen pulls up alongside, and that's where he stays all the way down that quarter-mile racing surface to the finish line, and by a wheel length, Gary Bergen defeats Tom Anderson. You can see how close the times were as Bergen wins the race.
I got a feeling Gary Bergen didn't know he won that race, too.
No, it was close. I looked over right at the finish line. He was right there.
6:26 to a 6:29.
Wow, that was close.
So Anderson has been involved in the two closest races of the day, but you got him this time.
Yeah, but I lost to him at the other two national events this year.
Well, Gary Bergen got his revenge. In the final two cars of this round, it'll be Dale Pulde against Rick Johnson. Pulde from Van Nuys, California, considered one of the toughest drivers around. For Rick Johnson, this has got to be his lucky meet. The Utica, New York-based driver had the upset win of his career in the first round of racing as he was pitted against the new track record holder, Don Prudhomme, who had recorded a speed of over 249 miles an hour. We watch Prudhomme go up in smoke. He drives away from the guardrail, and Johnson, streaking for the finish line, wins the race.
Don, you do everything right for 3 days. In round one, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's what's disgusting about this damn thing. I don't know.
It's really 2 races in a row that you've almost hit the rail in round one like that.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, just what can I say? Just hasn't been a good year.
An obviously dejected Don Prudhomme, but an elated Rick Johnson in the near lane has got to tangle now with Dale Pulde. Pulde leaves first, but loses traction. The car up in smoke. Johnson clean to the finish line to a 6:19 at 234 miles an hour. The car coming to a stop as we watch again the tire smoke showing for Dale Pulde, indicating that loss of traction that allows the competition to move ahead and hold the lead all the way to the finish line.
Well, a young guy that's been around a lot of years, but I think this is the first time we've got a chance to talk to him as a winner down here at the end of the racetrack. Rick Johnson doing a fine job. You got the snake, and now you're into the semis.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, Ronnie's doing a real good job tuning the car today. And it's shaking bad out there, and it's loose. And we're shifting early and just trying to get her through there the best way we can.
Rick Johnson and his crew chief, Ronnie Swearingen, getting the car ready to run against Mark Oswald in the semifinals. Raymond Beadle against Gary Bergen. This huge Spring Nationals crowd is enjoying all of the action on the racetrack, but there's a lot of work going on in the pit area. Steve Evans is with Doug Kerhulis.
Well, Doug Kerhulis, your opponent, Richard Tharp, a few trailers over, completely apart, all 8 pistons out of the motor. You haven't even taken the heads off.
No, we just, it ran really, really well. Just very easy and smooth, and there's no reason to take the heads off when it's not hurt. You can take it apart, and when you put it back together, you can mess something up. So it looks real good, and we just leave her alone.
Without X-ray vision, how do you know it's not hurt?
Well, we have a leak down tester that we use to check each cylinder, and it's absolutely come out perfect. The worst cylinder we have in the engine's like 27%, and anything like that is just perfect when it comes to nitro. So there's no problem. Just start it up and go race it.
One thing you know is Tharp will be plenty aggressive up there.
And no problem. Yeah, I like Richard. Richard's got to have to beat me. There's no problem. We'll race a good race. They've had a lot of problems. They can jump up and run good. We know that. So this car here should run a 77 or a 78, and if he can run quicker, he wins. But I think we're looking real, real good.
Okay, thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
While the Top Fuel racers get ready for the semi-final round of racing, here comes Pro Stock. The factory hot rods, the crowds love them. The Ford Thunderbirds, the Chevy Camaros, and the Pontiac Trans Ams. In this case, this is Bob Glidden. He has had a tremendous string of successes at the Spring Nationals. Bob, with his wife Etta, his crew chief, has won 4 straight. He is the defending champion. He is racing Butch Leal, known as the California Flash, but living now in Blacklick, Ohio. These cars very evenly matched. They can run a maximum cubic inch engine of 500 cubic inches. They must run carburetors. They must run on gasoline. They are very exotic, refined pieces of racing equipment. The Pontiac of Butch Leal is in the far lane. The Ford Thunderbird in the near lane for Bob Glidden, the defending champion. This is the semifinal round. We started with 16 cars. There are 4 remaining. The starting advantage appears to go to Glidden. The Ford Thunderbird pulling slightly ahead of Butch Leal, and it is Bob Glidden winning the race at 7.85 seconds. Butch Leal just about a car length behind. Our next pair already coming to the burnout area. In the near lane is Frank Iaconio. In the far lane is Don Kuntz. Iaconio finished number 2 in the world last season. He comes from the eastern seaboard of Totowa, New Jersey, his hometown. For Don Kuntz, Cayuga, Indiana is his hometown, and he has had a big upset win already this race. In the second round, he defeated the low qualifier and the reigning world champion Lee Shepard. So Don Kuntz in the Pontiac, the team of Kuntz and Clark, going against Frank Iaconio in the Chevy Camaro. A bit of a psychological staging battle going on. Kuntz is last to stage. The RPMs are up, and it's Iaconio out with the lead. He continues to pull away from Don Kuntz with a margin of over a car length at the finish line. Frank Iaconio wins it. The parachute comes off Don Kuntz's car, but he quickly brings it under control. Earlier, there were some other Spring Nationals champions crowned in our Sportsman Eliminator categories of competition. Let's take a look at the final rounds of racing in those categories. In Stock Eliminator, Don Holben of Lansing, Michigan was racing Steve Benyo of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the winner at the Spring Nationals, Don Holben. Our Super Stock final matched Dick Henry against Mike Farrell. And a close race to the finish line, but Mike Farrell, the winner in Super Stock. The Super Gas final saw Mark Powick going off against Mike Bazell. Mike Bazell of Logan, Ohio, the Super Gas champion. Competition Eliminator saw the Opal of Larry Kopp against Mike Withrow in the dragster. And in one of the closest handicap races of the day, Mike Withrow in the dragster pulls it out at the finish line. The Top Alcohol funny cars saw Frank Mandolini go off against Ace Manzo. Ace Manzo previously had a run-in with the net, and he made it all the way to the finals, but lost to Fred Mandolini, the Spring Nationals champion. And in Top Alcohol dragster, it was an upset, as a red light for Bubba Sewell gave the win automatically to Bill Walsh. Sewell had won every NHRA event to this point in 1983. So our congratulations going to all of the champions at the Spring Nationals. In our Sportsman Eliminator categories, in Top Alcohol dragster, Bill Walsh; Alcohol funny car, Fred Mandolini; Competition, Mike Withrow; Super Gas, Mike Bazell; Super Stock, Mike Farrell; Stock Eliminator, Don Holman. Coming up next, the Top Fuel semifinals at the Spring Nationals. The stage is set for the semifinal round of Top Fuel Eliminator as the Fort Worth, Texas oil man, Gene Snow, squares off against the reigning world champion, Shirley Muldowney from Mount Clemens, Michigan. Shirley has won the Top Fuel title at the Spring Nationals 4 times. She is the defending champion. She put on a new supercharger between the second round and this semifinal round of racing, trying to find that added horsepower advantage that she hopes will carry her past Snow and put her into the finals. For Gene Snow, he is applying those lessons learned for so many years of drag racing. He started back in funny cars many years ago, dropped out for a period of time as he formed his oil company, and then came back in Top Fuel Eliminator, is now matched against the reigning world champion in the semifinal round of racing. Snow in the far lane, Shirley Muldowney in the near lane. The burnout procedures completed. The crews have made their final checks of the cars, and it's a green light for both drivers. Shirley builds a bit of an advantage off the starting line, and she wins it by a car length. Shirley Muldowney, 5.89 seconds. Her speed over 241 miles an hour. As we look back, Shirley pulls away at the start and continues to maintain that lead as the two cars head down the quarter mile with a strip of paint that is the finish line. Shirley gets there first.
So Shirley Muldowney goes into the final round for the 5th time here at the Spring Nationals. And Shirley, you found that 10th, exactly, a 5.89.
Well, that may do it.
Get your sock off.
We've had some luck today, haven't we?
Well, the supercharger move paid off.
Yeah, I think I could have done something a little different on the line, but when they get here, they'll tell me.
Looks like there's plenty left in it now.
Oh, yes. Now we have something we can work with, and I'm sure they'll tune it up now.
Care to pick a winner for me in the other half of this round?
Yeah, for sure. Kerhulis, not as good a car, but a much better driver, and that's the one I'd like to race.
Let's watch it.
Steve, Shirley seems very set as to who she hopes her final round opponent will be. It'll be either Doug Kerhulis or Richard Tharp, both of whom are backing up in front of a huge crowd. Tharp from Dallas had the misfortune of losing the supercharger, exploding an engine in round number 1. He got the break, though, in the second round. For Kerhulis, it's been hard racing all the way, and Tharp, as the number 2 qualifier, just puts another roadblock in front of Doug Kerhulis to making it to the finals. Kerhulis from Bakersfield is having a great time at this race. As you saw earlier in talking with Steve, he is very confident of both his ability and the quality of his race car. Kerhulis is just beginning to make his mark on the national event scene, primarily concentrating his efforts previously in the Southern California area. For Richard Tharp, there are hundreds of stories that can and have been told about this famed Dallas, Texas driver. He is a former national champion. He is a former world champion. Last season, he laid out of drag racing and went midget car racing. But this year, driving for the team of Kilpatrick and Cannell, he is qualified in the number 2 spot and is racing Doug Kerhulis for the right to race Shirley Muldowney, and Tharp with a big lead. Kerhulis had problems off the starting line. Tharp drives it all the way through to a 5.87 second elapsed time, 0.02 of a second quicker than Shirley Muldowney. That will give the lane choice, which could become all important, to Tharp. Not an eye is taken off that starting line, though, as the funny cars get set. There are 4 cars remaining. It will be Raymond Beadle, the number 1 qualifier in the Blue Max, racing Gary Bergen in our first pair of cars in their semifinal round. Beadle and Bergen will be up in just a second. Steve Evans has had a chance to catch up to Richard Tharp.
For Richard Tharp, a very, very nice drive, and we have got some finals set up. Shirley Muldowney and Richard Tharp only 2/100ths of a second apart, and you're the quickest at 5.87.
That's good. You know, I always like to run Shirley anyway.
Well, I know you do. This is a little more of a war than a car race.
Yeah, well, she's created, so we'll let her have it.
You could did a super job of getting this thing back together, Richard. All 8 pistons out of it.
You know, we've had a little trouble this weekend, but we're going to get it together. We may get there. Who knows?
But when you had the blower flopping in the breeze in the first round, it's hard to believe you'd get this far now, huh?
Yeah, it sure is. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Richard.
A lot of credit has to go to Tharp and to his crew chief, Bill Schultz, to get the Kilpatrick and Cannell car into the finals, but it will be quite a race as Richard Tharp goes against Shirley Muldowney, and we have quite a race at hand as Gary Bergen goes against Raymond Beadle. Beadle in the blue Max in the far lane. Gary Bergen in the near lane, the Orange Baron out of Orange County, California, trying to take the measure of Raymond Beadle. Beadle the last to stage, and the first off the starting line as Beadle pulls ahead and crosses the finish line first with a 6.10, a 6:10. His elapsed time, the amount of time to travel that quarter of a mile from a standing start. So Raymond Beadle has moved into the finals of the Spring Nationals. He has been there before. Gary Bergen, his chance has got to come another year. The last pair of cars in this semifinals, Mark Oswald in the near lane, driving for Candies and Hughes. Will be running Rick Johnson from Utica, New York. Oswald, a former Top Fuel campaigner, moved into the brand new funny car this season for Candies and Hughes. Rick Johnson, one of the finer funny car drivers, and he has had an incredible string of victories at this event. Some say it's been a lot of luck, but Rick Johnson says he doesn't care how the wind comes. He's in the semifinals. The winner of this race will match up against Raymond Beadle, and a great start as Oswald loses control of the parachute, comes out on Rick Johnson's car. Oswald across the finish line with a 6:41 elapsed time, but the time is immaterial. He got there first. As we look back, you can see the Candies and Hughes car in the near lane losing traction. Oswald moving towards the center line, and there comes the parachute. Rick Johnson's car vibrating severely, and the parachute coming out.
The ignition coil apparently having shook off of the Candies and Hughes car, but it still had enough electricity to power it to the finish line ahead of Rick Johnson. Mark Oswald trying to get his helmet off. He knew he was in a car race that time, I guarantee you. Had it not been for Rick Johnson's parachute coming out, we might not be talking here.
Would have been in serious trouble. He was out there a good ways. It was smoking the tires pretty hard.
Looked like you drove it right out the back door, a good deal past the finish line, just to make good and sure you won.
Yeah, I knew I got around him, but it wasn't by much.
Did you see his chute come out?
Try. Yeah, I didn't see his chute came out. I seen him slow down. I figured I'd get around him.
You sure did.
It took the car right off.
The storybook finish for Rick Johnson comes to an end as we're set for the professional finals at the Spring Nationals. We're set for the professional finals at the Spring Nationals, and Pro Stock is on the line. Frank Iaconio in the Chevy Camaro in the near lane. Bob Glidden driving his Ford Thunderbird in the far lane. Glidden, finishing number 4 in the world last season, has had lots of problems earlier this year. Frank Iaconio was number 2, but Glidden has got a string going for him. He has won 4 straight Spring Nationals titles. Glidden into the staging beams last, both cars with the wheels in the air, and a close race at mid-track. The Camaro against the Thunderbird, and Glidden pulls it out. His wife, Etta, shows her happiness, and Glidden saved the best for last. 178 miles an hour, the fastest speed by a Pro Stocker at the Spring Nationals. The wheels up start for both drivers. As they move down track, Glidden begins to pull ahead, and that speed of 178 shows at the finish line.
This has been a great race for you.
Gosh, boy, I'll tell you, I'm tickled to death. It's been so long since we've done anything.
There's a lady waiting back in the truck that's going to be tickled to death, too. Congratulations to you and Etta.
Bob Glidden very happy to find the horsepower in that Ford Thunderbird that puts him into the winner's circle for the 5th consecutive time. A pair of close friends meeting in this final of funny car. Raymond Beadle driving the Blue Max in the near lane. Mark Oswald driving for Beadle's close friend, Paul Candies, and Leonard Hughes in the far lane. Beadle, the racing entrepreneur, is into 3 forms of motorsport this season. He's got a NASCAR car with Tim Richmond. Sammy Swindell drives the Blue Max sprint car, and he's won 2 races already this weekend. Can Beadle carry the string on? He's got the lead over Mark Oswald, and he pulls it out at the finish. Raymond Beadle, 6.05 seconds. His speed, 238 miles an hour. Let's watch. They leave the line almost simultaneously. But Beadle begins to pull ahead as Mark Oswald losing traction, the smoke coming off the tires indicating they're slipping. As they slip, Raymond Beadle moves ahead, and by a big lead at the finish line, he wins. At the starting line, let's watch the reaction of the crew. Dale Emery nearest the camera. Fred Miller coming over to say, hey, we've finally done it. We have won one. So Raymond Beadle has won another Spring Nationals title.
Anybody who may have thought that Raymond Beadle was spreading himself too thin with NASCAR racing and sprint car racing ought to be down here with us right now to see the man remove his mask, his first final round appearance this season, and a successful one. Congratulations, Raymond.
Thank you, Steve.
You had a better reaction time, a 6:05. You just had it all together.
Well, we were ready for the final. You know, we was keyed up since Sammy won Friday and Saturday. Well, hopefully we could repeat, too. He's making us look bad.
While there were a pair of friends meeting in the funny car final, you could cut the tension with a knife at the starting line as Richard Tharp in the near lane gets set to go against the reigning world champion, Shirley Muldowney. As you can tell, they are not the closest of friends. Tharp had lots of problems earlier in the race when he exploded the engine in the first round. Shirley's performance has been improving throughout the event, but Tharp has the lane choice by virtue of 0.02 of a second in the semifinal round. You cannot count out either driver in this race. They are both former world champions. Shirley is the reigning champ. The concentration on the starting line, intense by both drivers, and it is Tharp out first as Shirley loses traction, and Tharp explodes the motor. He holds on to win it. The supercharger hanging off the side of the car, and Richard Tharp defeats Shirley Muldowney for the Top Fuel title. The defending champion falling to defeat in the finals. As you can watch, Richard Tharp just a little bit ahead of Shirley Muldowney as she smokes the tires, has to back off just a little bit to let him regain traction, and Tharp explodes into a ball of flame. From another angle, you see the lead that Tharp has at that point. He explodes the engine. He's just coasting right now. Shirley is thundering for the finish line. She runs 247 miles an hour. Richard Tharp, 176. But the advantage he built up early in the race, sufficient to give him the victory. Raymond Beadle coming over to give a big hug to his fellow Texan as Richard Tharp has annexed the Top Fuel title at the Spring Nationals. The crew laying the demolished supercharger back on top of the motor, but it's all over now. Tharp wins.
Shirley Muldowney already out of her car and in the truck. Shirley, that was a very unusual final round. I've never seen anything like it.
I smoked the tires and it shook, and I was going to ease out of it, and for a second I think I did because he was just so far out there, and then he destroyed another one, and I got on it, but I wasn't quick enough. So I think I gave it to him, really. I mean, because of his bad luck. That's real bad luck. But I think this one cost him about $50,000.
It wasn't a cheap weekend for their team. And Shirley Muldowney's going to have some champagne anyway. Good girl.
Sure. I'm not going to give it to Tharp, that's for sure.
I can bet, Steve, that Tharp's got some champagne of his own as he is the Spring Nationals Top Fuel champion. Our congratulations to all the winners. Don't anybody go away. We've got something left for you. Championship drag racing is noted for its innovative style, and some of the prime examples are the exhibition vehicles certified by NHRA. This is Roger Gustin. It looks like a funny car, but its power source is a jet engine, complete with afterburner, shooting flames out the back of the funny car. Roger Gustin is approaching the starting line for the final run of the day at the Spring Nationals. This jet engine is converted from an airplane to be used on the ground. It is designed to power this car at over 250 miles an hour through a quarter of a mile. A crewman holds the Christmas tree as the car thunders off the line, and Roger Gustin streaks to the finish with a thrilling conclusion to this Spring Nationals Championship. Roger Gustin and his jet funny car. We hope you have enjoyed all of the Spring Nationals action. For Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long from Columbus. The executive producer of Diamond P Sports is Harvey M. Pellish, produced and directed by John B. Mullen.